I appreciate a lot of you in the comment sections to the last couple of music-related videos I've produced on this channel, keeping me up to speed on KUTLESS. Because I was under the impression that Words of Fire was their most recent track release, and I was apparently wrong. Which, you know what, hey, I've been wrong before. That's why I appreciate the comment section in part, because you guys can perhaps keep me up to speed on things that I've overlooked or that I've missed or had no clue about. Words of Fire was not the only song to release, and some of you might remember if you saw that video, just how impressed I was with not only that particular piece as a first listen and metalhead, but as a KUTLESS fan. And I've been for a number of years. You know, I grew up on Christian music. I've said many times on this channel, that was my baseline coming into the music world, and it's evolved from that into a first passion. One that, as I've said in the evolution of 2023, and with 2022 as well in regard, I've wanted to bring, generally speaking, as a grander focus on this channel of coverage focus, apart from other artistic ventures, given that I have such a deep resonance with it. And it's materialized quite well, and it will be in the future. And groups like KUTLESS are deeply significant additions for me. Because KUTLESS is one of those foundational groups that I remember as a kid growing up with. You know, Sea of Faces, I think everybody knows that one, and probably identifies very well with that track. It's still a radio play hit. But I remember, back when KUTLESS came on the scene, their first couple music videos rolled out, they impressed me. And they were one of my first introductions, like a few others, Amber Lynn, for example, Skillet. They were one of my first introductions into the rock sphere, and ever since, you know, at that point, it's been an evolution. It was more so Christian contemporary and worship that I was raised on, and I still listen sporadically, you know, tunes that are offered, but metal and rock are more up my alley. As a metalhead, it's just what I generally prefer. Everybody has, you know, their specific preferences. KUTLESS, for me, though, has been a long-time favorite. So to hear that they were releasing new stuff upon Words of Fire, I'm like, oh, I'm game. Especially expanding the library of what I cover on this channel related to Christian music, that's great. End of the World, though. This is the newest. Again, bit of a surprise. I wasn't aware of it, and I appreciate everybody keeping me up to speed on that. And the track gets even better than just KUTLESS on an attribution, which I'm excited for enough. But this also features, I'm assuming, the vocal talents of Kevin Young from Disciple, who I'm also a big fan of, and I've been thinking a lot lately about, because I realized, you know, I was just bruising around of groups that I've wanted to cover, and tracks I've been gathering in terms of newer releases I haven't listened to yet, and will have that experience in the future of listening to it with you first. I haven't looked at Disciple in terms of recent offerings. The last album I listened to from them, because I have it in my playlist right now as I speak, that was Long Live the Rebels, 2016. That's the last one I have from them. Yep, I gotta catch up with Disciple, but I've been a fan for a long time of theirs since I first heard them on the radio. I think that was around the time that Things Left Unsaid, the EP track, popped up, as well as a couple tracks. I'm thinking back to my Air One days. I think that album was Horseshoes and Hand Grenades. I love that one. So to hear him again, especially in a collaborative capacity, which he's done before with other groups as well, let's say, for example, Fireflight, another longtime favorite of mine, he did that one track with them, Die Free. Very good work. I would highly recommend that if you've never heard it, as well as Fireflight generally. In the Christian rock sphere, they're great. Like, a lot of people have been longtime fan. And I've certainly seen their fan base. It's quite huge. I've been to Fireflight Live, in fact. Not Disciple. KUTLESS probably, have I ever been to a KUTLESS live showing? Like, probably, no. Or many years ago or so, like when I was really young. Anyway, time flies, but I'm happy to bring KUTLESS back on again. Words of Fire was great to get back into that rock spirit of things too, because they've played around as well. They've done, you know, stuff along the Christian contemporary lines, but their mainstay really has been rock. That was their foundation when they came on the scene. And even then, there were some, you know, gentler tunes, like I said, Sea of Faces, right? There's a broad mix. Let's see where End of the World goes. I'm anticipating a harder direction because of the Disciple attribution. Although even Disciple's done a bit of a mix as well. I mean, I don't know. But let's see. I mean, again, like I said, Words of Fire was fire indeed. I'm going to go ahead and cue up the lyric video. In this case, we have a visualizer to accompany our first experience with the piece. And if you're somebody that's not experienced my coverage before in regards to music-related work, I normally try and provide lyrics, you know, as a provision to the audience member if you happen to be somebody who likes to read along with the message of the piece, and rather than having to require you to pull up another tab, I provide those in the video feed. In this case, who was it that put out the video? Beck Recordings. They've helped me out a bit. They've saved me some editing time. I appreciate that. So I can get this video out faster, as I promised I would. Anyway, here we go. Let's take a look at KUTLESS and gauge this together. I think if you've never heard KUTLESS before, because some of you might be approaching this as a first introduction, given that I cover a broad range of artists, I hope you'll like them as much as I have. I mean, I think there's broad appeal. You don't necessarily have to be Christian to enjoy a good rock group, right? I think that makes the experience even better, because then you can find it directly speaking to you in the message. And I haven't read the lyrics in advance yet, so this is entirely fresh, but I think you're going to be in for a good experience. I do. Going on faith here. This is KUTLESS, after all. I mean, I've had years of experience with them. That's a long piece, too, at nearly 6 minutes. Plenty to enjoy. This is an interesting opening. I'm hearing like a beach breeze. A howling. Is this an ever group going down the conceptual line? I don't know. Everybody's doing that these days, so, and taking on a sci-fi approach, no less. I don't know. Let's see. Grand scale and eeriness. Nice. Okay, I hear it. Steady growth. Nice progression. Good scope so far. Nice. Another rough one. Going back to basics. I love it. And I don't mean basics in the negative, by the way. I mean it with all due respect. That's a thorough riff. I like that.
This is the beginning of the end. The seals have been broken. The true and faithful witness with thunder.
Wonderful vocals. I like this lyrical inspiration. It's kind of evoking Revelation for me. Yeah, definitely. Interesting. Everybody's thinking Book of Revelation these days. Nice connection. I like this, especially in the conceptual space. There is a vibe of that in the visualizer. I'll explain that more in the end, but I like the transformation here. Great sound effect addition as well. Rationalizing revelation with modernity. This is a really interesting association. I'm curious we haven't heard Kevin Young pop up yet. There we go. I really like this. Oh, wow. I love the explicit biblical line. This is so interesting. I like this. That's wonderful. Forgive me. I know I'm sitting here kind of like acting dumbfounded. I'm trying to figure out where to go with this piece because there's so many angles of what I could highlight with it. And I want to touch on every point because I think this track deserves it. Everybody's touching on... No, I want to rephrase that. I think the connection here with End of the World... I would ask if anybody listening to this, and again, like I said, I felt that you could approach this track from a broad perspective, whether you happen to be just generally a rock fan. And again, I cover a broad mix here. I don't just cover stuff within the Christian landscape, I cover some secular artists as well. I'm very curious to hear if you so wish to disclose your angle on this. I leave it up to you. If anybody listening to this doesn't happen to necessarily... align with the Christian faith, or you wouldn't attribute Christianity to yourself as a beheld view. Does this move you? Because I think it's speaking to a variety of people, in particular because of its timeliness. And to keep this simple, I think we live in a world right now that, anybody can speak to this, we're just so shrouded in chaos these days, to various extents and contexts. We look at reality now and we don't know necessarily what to make of it because the world seems to be at a boiling, chaotic point. Or maybe it's even exceeding that at this point. We could describe it, I'm sure, different ways, depending on our lives and what we're seeing in our general surroundings, whether they be perhaps on news headlines or, online or just in our day-to-day local surroundings, people that we know. A lot of people are thinking about, or at least I've heard this brought in consideration, especially publicly. Let's say, for example, those of you who are not familiar with my works, you probably wouldn't know that I spend a lot of concentration in the cinema space as well. Again, I cover a variety of artistic landscapes. Music for me is more so a first passion, but I cover the other ones as well. I am well aware that there has been, for some years, there's been a surge in apocalyptic end-of-the-world type movies. In the Christian sphere, just a little while ago, I haven't looked at it yet, I'm going to, but that new Left Behind remake released. And I looked at that and I'm like, everybody, it just hit my mind, like, everybody's speaking of Revelation these days. The book of Revelation is what I mean. I'm, in fact, part of a men's Bible study where, what's the book we're going through? Revelation. We've been since last year. It is a... complex book to unravel, but it's fascinating, right? It's one of those books that, again, we don't necessarily know how the end will articulate itself in detail because Revelation is true, right? It's got that biblical basis, so it's the honest word of God, but still it's deeply poetic and figurative in its styling of explanation, and not everything is openly disclosed, right? The 22 chapters within that book are in some ways very imaginary and abstract in its vision, that we have this what's the word I want to use? We can't put all the puzzle pieces together, right? We have enough to go off of to get the general impression of what God is trying to say in many regards, and even then over time that book becomes a bit fresher in its presence, and we can start perhaps imagining it in the context of the world and how it will look. But it is deeply futuristic and in some parts speculative in its imagination of detailed imagery, that there is still a bit of an ambiguity in how we place that into the world, but not the truths and the basis of the occurrences of what will happen, because it's still very explicit in many regards, but still at the same time there's an ambiguity that's established in there. I forget where the verse is, but there's disclosure in that book on part of John the apostle, the writer, from God, not to disclose certain revelations, to borrow a term. I find this piece, again, like I said, very timely, because there seems to be a real focus on the way the world is right now on revelation. Not just, it seems, in Christian circles, but as well perhaps in other connection points into our modern world. I'm very curious, like I said, if anybody is looking at this from a perspective where you don't consider yourself to align with Christianity or any denomination under that or anything close, how best do you connect with the energy of the piece? Because I think it's speaking to both Christians and a broad world. And it's speaking to both very well and adeptly. It's a deeply personal piece, and it's highly engrossing. I'll get to the music in a minute, but I'm just really surprised by that. It's explicitly biblical in its vision. I mean, you can tell immediately the seals have been broken. The true and where's the other part? The moon like blood, stars are falling from the sky. So again, it's speaking in context revelation, though we can all look at this going, the world is kind of like almost, it seems like it's at that point every single day. Not to that severity, but it feels close in emotion. So they lay the groundwork that indicates to me quite clearly what this is meant to evoke in a sentiment. And then they open up into the emotional experience, right? And even then, there's also other details they go into of truths from the Book of Revelation. Then or now, every knee will bend. I thought it said bow. Okay, we will. It's so explicit, though. I like that. Again, there's a clear destination put in mind. So they establish the scene of the chaos, right? And even then, I'll build off of this, but they're very explicit in terms of the biblical connection in the way that you word it. Even if perhaps you could make that more abstract in your interpretation and say, well, that could just be describing from a poetic landscape of imagination, a specific concrete imagination, a chaotic, apocalyptic world. Fair, right? You could easily make that statement. But then they shift that to, let's examine the explanation of where people's hearts are at, broadly speaking. It's just the way there's so many messages to this piece. I mean, like, how many threads do I want to extract here? Because the universal truth thing they're getting to is, with the bass line of the song, all this is happening around you. Reconciling how that peace can be found amid turbulent times. And they say explicitly in the song as well, then or now we will breathe the name of Jesus. It's kind of hard to read the lyrics, at least from that one screen, because it's like white on white. I think I'm getting that right, but it's very explicit again in the destination. I'd be really curious to hear again who the band had in mind of who they're explicitly speaking to. Because I could see this easily appealing to somebody who's going through some particular situation where it does feel like this world around them is falling apart, maybe to this emotional severity, not literally, but emotional. And they're looking for that destination of hope where, as the song and the song and the Christian theology that this is clearly based on, explicitly woven into the song as well, that peace is established through Jesus, right, or through belief in Jesus, and what's the word I want to say? Acceptance of Him. I'm just really surprised by it. But again, who? Now I think it's speaking to multiple different crowds. Because again, I read this because I could see it impressing itself on Christians too. It establishes the scene for, I would assume, like non-believers, people who are looking at the situation in the world today going, we just live in turbulent times, where can we find that hope? But then I read, where is it in this song? It's earlier on, I think, or maybe it's in the middle? Yeah. This is, where is it? This is where the streets, oh come on, pop up. This is where the streets run with the blood, but we refuse to, I don't know, my scrolling thing is weird. I might not be pulling up everything, so I'm probably just pulling out a selection here rather than looking at a sheet with the full lyrics laid out. We refuse to help them, our doors left unopened, the hardened hearts, darkness tears across the sky, the wrath of God, tell me where you're going to hide. I think this is both a missions call for Christians and a call to the grieving non-believer of the world around them. If I had to sum it up, I think it's touching both quite well. I don't think it's myopic towards one audience. I think it's got two in mind. And maybe more than that as well. Music can speak to people differently, right? Especially on Christian music. I've heard so many testimonials over the years, like when you tune into Christian radio, of this song touched my life in this way or that way. I mean, this song can have a quite diverse application. I would think that's possible. I'm just extracting a couple paths here. That's a good lyrical summary. I want to be even here on how I approach everything, so I'll sum that up there. I think it's wonderful in terms of its boldness and its explicitity in regards to the Christian vision, especially on materializing a clear theme and a connection point to Revelation. I like that a lot. And I think we are in a world where people need to hear a message like that. I think it's explained very well in nearly 6 minutes, and it's a great experience. The tune, wonderful construction. I love that hard opener. It's very KUTLESS, especially on the rock roots. And Kevin Young coming in. I love Disciple so much. He's a great inclusion as well. Conceptually speaking, this is an amplification, I think. Again, the depth here. And as I said, there's a lot of groups right now in the rock and metal space playing around with conceptual visions. I've covered many. Shinedown, I'm thinking ones maybe they're personally relevant or can be extracted that way. Shinedown, Starset, Demon Hunter, Fawn in Reverse. What I see here, though, is particularly unique. And I did see, by the way, for you Starset fans, and I know there's some of you that might be watching this, maybe. You know how much I love that group. If you ever heard them, by the way, alternative rock and metal with a pop bend, too, and very sci-fi electronic, I highly recommend them. But I did get a Starset vibe on that introduction, which is why I mentioned them. Like, I'm sitting there thinking, okay, we're in space, technological opener, some robotic dialogue. Like, this is starting to sound like Starset again. And it seems like, how many groups am I going to look at these days that have Starset connections? It's hilarious to me, especially in terms of their conceptual visions. It's Shinedown, Demon Hunter as well. Both of them, I'm like, like Starset just seems to be such a big influence on everybody. And watching this, I'm like, okay, yep, we're going with Starset vibes. All right, third group now. But it builds off the conceptual format quite nicely, and I think it does amplify it. With the Christian vision, how was I going to say this? The poetic explanation of the piece, and the visualizer helps. The visualizer's so Starset. I can't unsee that connection at all. This, for me, and I've listened to many of the examples I mentioned have a deeper meaning to the pieces when they go into the conceptual side. There's oftentimes a very real-world comparison, but for me, I felt like this is a bit of an amplification from what I've normally seen. And I don't know if KUTLESS was trying to go down the conceptual route with this. Perhaps not. It just evokes that for me in regards to the visualizer. It fits very well into that scene. I'm really impressed with this piece the more I think about it. I mean, I knew going in, I love it because it's KUTLESS. Especially on that rough side, I'm like, yes, give me more of that. I love it. Yeah, that's what brought me in since I was a kid. Not What You See era. Anybody? Like, a lot to think about with that piece. So much personality and life to it. Hard to extract as well on a first impression. Some tracks, when I look at them, the model that I run with on this channel might not necessarily be the best to apply. With particular songs, and some work fine in terms of verse experiences, but others you have to really sit down and mull over them. And I'm trying to give you a summary right now, but I have an awe for this and a deep respect. To weave in such a biblical immersion and a powerful parallel with a viewpoint set on the modern world. So again, we got that biblical historical lens influencing our view of where we're currently now. To give that a conceptual aesthetic and with such a personal articulation and a cathartic one, I like this direction with KUTLESS. Especially if going into the hybrid space, I would say, with taking their rock roots and bringing in a worship perspective in a unique way. It's very aggressive in terms of styling, but different genre, I guess, in feel. But a lot to consider with that piece. I mean, that's powerful work. Music is, in my opinion, one of the more powerful art forms that exist today. I mean, really, how many artistic adventures are, but music, for me, really is the most potent. I'd be very curious to hear what your thoughts are down below. And whatever angle you come from, again, like, if you wish to just include it down below. If you're a longtime KUTLESS fan, I'd love to hear your thoughts as well. If you happen to be a first-time listener to theirs, again, I would highly recommend considering their listen on their past library. They've had so many good pieces. I could easily recommend many names to you. If you're curious, let me know down below. I'd be happy to oblige on that request. But I really would like some clarity among audience perspective. Wherever you happen to be, I would love to hear from both sides. Christian, non-Christian, I would love to hear what your feelings are on that piece. Because I think it touches each group in very different ways. Or it can. It has a capability to, I should maybe say it that way. A lot to consider with End of the World. Feels very timely and fitting to what a lot of groups are doing these days. Even in spirit of the conceptual space, many are going down that route in their messages, not just perhaps an articulation of the music or the visual side, or feeling. This is a piece that requires a lot of listens, I think, to really set into its heart. But on a first impression alone, it speaks volumes. I feel like I'm just scratching the surface of it, and I feel like that's kind of the necessary step you have to take to get introduced, but it's an experience to take in, not just in its catharsis, or its therapeutic, supernatural perspective on the modern world, for whoever it's touching in message. But even just on a music listen, it's a complex piece. I'm very happy and content with its scope. And I think as a repeat listen, it definitely warrants more attention. I think it's easily capable of getting many re-listens to best set into its heart completely. But it is a piece that, if I had to sum it up, has an extensive strength. I'm very impressed with it. Thank you so much for watching this video. Before you bounce, feel free to drop a like and comment, subscribe to this channel with a ding on the bell, and share this video with your friends. And consider checking out the description here. There you'll find links to my other channels, as well as addresses to my other social media accounts and ways you can help support my work if you feel so inclined. May God bless you, and looking forward to when our paths cross again.